Is the hardest StrataScratch problem, Google Fit user tracking, where we have to, this was a Google interview question where you have to find the average session traveled by Google Fit users based upon GPS location data. And to show you why it's the hardest problem is we're going to have to calculate this at the end, the curvature of the Earth based upon users' first and last step, making sure that they have more than one step and that they just didn't turn on and then turn it immediately off. And here is the final solution and why it's the hardest problem by far. And I would be very impressed if someone can memorize this last part. And let's get started. Here is what the data set looks like. And the first thing we're going to have to do is make sure that there's more than one step. In order to make sure there's more than one step, we are going to have to get the session ID, step ID, and the date, and count that. How many times did that user step? So we're going to call this as num steps. And then we're going to have to group by this. Now let's run this query to make sure that it is in fact correct. And this is what we want. So then the next thing we're going to have to do is do M1 as here. And then we're going to have to select. We're going to select these three things. And then from M1, where the num steps is greater than 1. Okay. And this should actually be user ID, not step ID, user ID. There we go. This is how many users have more than one step. The next thing we're going to have to do is save this as a secondary table. We're not going to use this table until the very end because these are the only users and sessions that we actually need. The next thing we're going to have to do is get, this is where one of the harder parts too. We're going to have to select the user. We're going to do a ranking. So we're going to select the user ID, the session ID, and we're going to have to basically get the longitude and latitude. Longitude. Here's the latitude, longitude from the original data set. Again, we're going to have to rank the first and last step. And then get the distance between those two. Here they are. And we're going to have to use the rank function. So rank. And if you don't know how to do this, I'll lead you into a different video. Partition by. So we're going to have to partition by these two things. Order by the step ID. And we're going to have to get the first step. So ascending. This is the first step. The first step that they took. And let's run this to make sure there's no query error, which there is, which is why I ran it. Oh, there shouldn't be a comma here. Not yet, at least. There will be eventually. Here we go. The next thing we're going to have to do is do a second rank. And this is the last step. Except this will be descending. Here we go. This is what we want. So this is the first step and last step with all the data we need ranked. And now we have to put a comma there. We're going to save this as another table. Next thing we're going to have to do is, this is the hard part where I have to use a self-join, and I'll send you a different video if you don't know how to do a self-join. But we're going to have to select the user ID, the session ID, from the CTE A, inner join CTE B on So basically we have to do where A dot user ID is equal to B dot user ID, and A dot session ID is equal to B dot session ID. And no column user ID, ambiguous column. Okay, so we need to put which column. It doesn't really matter because they're joined. It's going to be the same column. And the next thing we need to do is get the A dot latitude and longitude. Let's just copy them both, make it easier. Put an A in front, and then we're going to do it again and put a B in front. But it's going to run. But what we need to do is do where the first step is equal to 1, and I guess we should do A dot first step and B dot last step is equal to 1. Essentially, this is getting the first step from here and the last step from here. And we're going to call this, to make this as simple as possible, we're going to call this as latitude 1. We're going to have to give it a different name. So when we write our final query, it'll know which one to pull. And then here we have to do longitude 1. And then here as latitude 2. And here as longitude 2. And let's run this. And it worked with no errors. So the next thing we have to do is save this as a different table, CT2, and combine this all together. And this is the part that, like I said at the very beginning, this is the template. I do not have this memorized. If I get 1,000 subscribers, I will memorize this if you really want me to. And let's run this. Keyword. So latitude 1, longitude 2. That's what we named them. With CTE2 as here. And here it is. The final answer. This is the average distance that they traveled, depending on if it's curved or flat, and